How's it hanging, everybody? So today we're talking Chained Echoes versus Sea of Stars. For the last time, I promise I'm not going to do this to you guys again or to myself again. A tiny bit of housekeeping I will mention. It's relevant to this video. I recorded a video on this topic when the demo of Sea of Stars launched earlier this year, and the video blew up. It wasn't a very good video. I'm not sure why it blew up. I guess it's just a topic that people were really hungry for. So now here I am, and I've got this topic in front of me, but I haven't actually given my own thoughts, my own answer to the question. The age-old question at this point: which game is better, Sea of Stars or Chained Echoes? I now have my own answer I can share because I've played both titles all the way through. Chained Echoes came out last month. I've had time to play through the entire game, let it marinate for a couple weeks, so I kind of know how I feel about it in my heart of hearts, and we're just going to get right into it. First of all, let me make a quick disclaimer. This is not a review of either Sea of Stars or Chained Echoes. This is just a casual discussion. We're going to break down each game. We're going to go through a little list of different aspects of each game: graphics, gameplay, story, all that stuff. I mean, I figure that's probably the simplest way to do it, so we'll do it that way. What other? I had one other housekeeping thing. I'll mention it if I remember it, but let's just go ahead and get into it. It's late, and I gotta get this thing done because I've been procrastinating getting this video done. But let's just get into it. Let's talk about gameplay first. So, Sea of Stars, just finished it, very fresh on my mind, and it has extremely satisfactory gameplay. I mean, it's a combination of Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG. It has the timed mechanics of Super Mario RPG. I didn't love those mechanics in this game. I guess I'm honestly not a huge Mario RPG fan. I think it's maybe a tad overrated, but I think that it's a solid point of inspiration to kind of base a newer game around. And so I think it's cool that they did it. And I think it generally works well. And then, of course, there's the Chrono Trigger side of things with the combo maneuvers that you can do and stuff. It's a pretty straightforward, familiar feeling combat system if you're used to RPGs, JRPGs, and such. And I thought that it was a solid combat system. The exploration in the game, I think, is where it really shines because of all these little nooks and crannies that you can travel around in this big, basically a world full of pretty large locations, and that was super solid. The mini game is also really cool in Sea of Stars. So Sea of Stars has quite good gameplay. It's not going to blow you away. It's a little bit predictable, but it's just solid and satisfactory, I would say. I never was disappointed to have to fight, a battle or something. Actually, maybe I was a couple times, but there's some backtracking you have to do. And the game doesn't open up until the very end when it becomes a lot more fun to traverse. But overall, I was very happy with the gameplay of Sea of Stars. Chained Echoes has, I would say, exceptional gameplay for a few key reasons. For one, the combat is pretty much second to none. Incredibly unique, incredibly fun, and it's always a little different. Even if you're fighting, the same enemies a number of times, each fight is like its own little boss fight. And not to say that it's as difficult as a boss fight, but you really have to stay on your toes and you have to follow that overdrive meter. The overdrive meter is basically just a level in the game, and certain attacks and certain actions will send it in one direction, and other interactions that you do, usually defensive moves, send it in the other direction. So it's this balancing act, and it's really cool because certain things will send it in the reverse direction. and it's kind of randomized each turn. So it just makes it wholly unique. Every battle is like its own little puzzle to solve, and you never know exactly what it's going to get. I feel like the game would be immensely easier if this was missing, because then you could just, bulldoze your way through each fight and just do, the most powerful attacks you can and get through things a lot faster. But you have to be more tactful. And I really appreciate this. I know when I say this out loud, it sounds like it might be an unwelcome thing. Oh, well, why wouldn't I just want to have, unrestricted, pulverize my opponent type of strategy? And it's like, well, that's fun sometimes, but this game just does it a little differently. Also, Chained Echoes, fun exploration as well. Probably not on the level of Sea of Stars, but there's plenty of large locations that you can go to. There's plenty of dungeons you can go to, and there's lots of treasure that you can find, and it's solid in that way. I would say it's a little more average than great, but Chained Echoes works in the exploration side of things. Overall, I would say that the gameplay has to go to Chained Echoes just because the combat is really that great, that it really just puts Chained Echoes into another level. Next up, let's talk about story. This is what I really want to talk about, the story of both games. First of all, let me mention that I tend to be someone who appreciates story, not necessarily like the character-driven side of storytelling, but more the universe building, the overarching themes, the the politics within those themes, the good and evil, the source of that good and evil, where did it come from? And this can be for video games or any other media. I just like storytelling that sort of emphasizes the overall framework over the individual characters that you're kind of zooming in on. And I will say that the strength of both games is that it has a more universe building and overall framework emphasis on. That's the strength of both games. That's not to say that the games have bad character development or character stories or character likability or anything like that. Both games have some incredible character moments. Both games have some characters that I find really endearing and like a lot. I mean, we're looking at Sea of Stars footage right now, and of course, if you know about Sea of Stars, Garl is this sort of like, he's this breath of fresh air. He's like the best of humanity, and it's done in a really endearing way. It's not like a boring way of just like, oh, this guy is goody two shoes. No, he's actually a very endearing character. And in Chained Echoes, there's plenty of that going on as well. Sea of Stars tells the story of these two solstice warriors. They are born at opposite times of the same year, and they go through this sort of historic ritual of being brought up through an academy where they learn how to fight these evil forces, and then you get to learn about those evil forces, you get to learn the source of them and all of that good stuff. And I think that the universe building is a little bit more predictable, a little bit more pedestrian, but also just really well done. Like, one thing that you'll notice me saying about Sea of Stars is it doesn't do that many things like astoundingly well, but everything is very solid. Sea of Stars is very much a sum of its parts kind of game. It's just everything fits together very nicely. With Chained Echoes, however, the story of Chained Echoes is its absolute and utter strength. It is, okay, when it comes to universe building, when it comes to defining these overarching themes, they do some things that are just so absolutely cool with this story. I mean, I'm just going to give you one example. And I honestly cannot say much about this topic. I cannot tell you that much about the overarching themes of this game because it just gets straight into spoiler territories. Every adjective and topic that I want to mention just takes you straight to spoiler territory. So I got to be very careful, but I will say this. One thing about this game is there are characters in the game human characters called the AAR, I think is how it's spelled. And these are characters that live hundreds of years, up to like 1,000 years. And they live on the earth among other humans and other races. And they bring with them, of course, so much history, because they are these like living historians that have lived through all of these different moments in time from forgotten ages, or ages that would otherwise be forgotten. And what they manage to do, what the game manages to do with that concept, and is just absolutely incredible. It is amazing storytelling, and the story is just, I think it may be my favorite RPG story of all time. I really cannot overemphasize how good the story is. I think it's fair that we follow up with the ending of both games. I'm not going to tell you anything about the endings, but I will say that neither ending is actually great. I think that both games are great. I haven't actually mentioned that yet, but yes, both games are great. But the ending of, like, let's go with the ending of Sea of Stars. It's a little bit underwhelming. There's a true ending, and then there's, a regular ending. You have to get the regular ending before you get the true ending. And I say this, I don't consider that a spoiler at all, because many JRPGs do this, where they have, a regular ending and then a true ending, sometimes many endings. So I don't think it's anyway spoiler territory for me to mention that. But Chained Echoes, on the other hand, has an ending that is, I would say it feels unearned, because Chained Echoes is a story about like kind of morality and lessons learned and all of these different character building kind of themes that just that landing is just not stuck in the end of this game. It feels unearned, and it feels just quite out of place and quite strange. But the good thing about, I guess, both of these endings, especially Chained Echoes, is sort of mediocre as that ending is, it doesn't ruin the story, because again, the strength of both stories is not the characters that you're zooming in on their own tales and their own journey within this big overarching world and universe. It really, the strength is the universe and, like I said, the overarching themes. I'm repeating myself, but that's the strength of both games, and that stays intact, even though the character endings are not the greatest for either game. The ending of Sea of Stars, I will mention, the developers essentially make you 100% the game, or damn near, to actually even be eligible to approach the true ending of the game. And I was very disappointed in this design decision. I know that, a lot of games, especially like Chrono Trigger that this game is referencing, does a similar thing with its structure of endings and all that. But I just found this to be really gratuitous, because there are tasks that you have to do. One task in particular, I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing when I realized what I had to do to beat the game. And I almost didn't do it. I almost just, gave up at that moment. But I decided, look, I've come this far. And the good thing is the game is manageable enough to where, you can do this. You can knock out the task that I'm talking about. It's not a fun task. It's a tedious task. It's a lot of backtracking and stuff like that. But I got through it. I will put it this way, though. I did a lot of the side content in this game as I led up to that first ending. And then after I did the first ending, I had to spend like a whole extra day of just playing the game to do all of the things I needed to do to be eligible for that true ending and actually beat the game for real. So I was not expecting to put that extra day in the game. I thought it was at the end, but that's how it goes sometimes. So just know that going into Sea of Stars, that's something that's probably going to irk you a little bit when you move forward in the game, or maybe not. Maybe your mileage varies quite a lot. Okay, next up, let's talk about music. The music from these games is, let's see here. I got a little note up here. I want to remember everyone's names. Okay, so with Chained Echoes, the music is made by Eddie Marianucra. I'm going to try that again. Eddie Marianucra. Okay, Sea of Stars, made by Eric W. Brown, with a little guest feature by Yasunori Mitsuda. But let's be real, the Yasunori Mitsuda is an OG of JRPG soundtracks. He did Chrono Trigger, he did Xenogears, and a bunch of other ones. The guy is a legend, and so it's really cool that they got him on this project. But he did very few tracks. He did, I think, something like maybe 5-6 tracks. I mean, you know, compared to the dozens and dozens and dozens of tracks that Eric W. Brown did. And so really the star of the show here for Sea of Stars is Eric W. Brown. Here's what I will say about the Sea of Stars soundtrack. It's extremely good. It's extremely well made. I think Eric W. Brown has like a metal background, if I have that right. And that comes through. You hear some metal in some of the tracks, but it's not like off-putting if you're not a metal fan. It's very palatable interpretations of metal. You hear some like kind of cheesy power metal here and there, and then just some other flavors of metal that I probably don't have the vocabulary for. But, you know, you hear that kind of DNA there. But then there's also just a lot of, I would say, gratuitous, like, retro game sounding stuff. Like, sometimes I was listening to a track in Sea of Stars, and I was like, okay, am I playing, like, Sonic Mania, or am I playing Sea of Stars? I don't know. Maybe it's the former, because some of the songs are just so over the top retro that it kind of is a little bit cheesy. But then so many of the other tracks are not like this. So many of the other tracks are like, you know, much more subdued. The Mitsuda tracks are like that, I think. And then many of Eric W. Brown's tracks are like that as well. But I did get that retro overload feel some of the time. With Chained Echoes, I think that this was just a very good effort by Eddie, and he really made a soundtrack that is classic. It appeals to all the sensibilities, especially the kind of more ballady songs, but then it's being a little bit reductive because there's so many faster songs as well. But I feel like it feels more like a classic RPG. It's maybe a little bit more predictable in that way, but it's just so well made. I mean, there are tracks that I'm still coming back to on the Chained Echoes soundtrack. So it's a more traditional soundtrack, but at the same time, there are some definite surprises. There's actually a metal track or two in this soundtrack as well. And then I feel like there's a lot of prog rock influence in the Chained Echoes soundtrack, which for me, I really appreciated. There are tracks that sound like prog rock, math rock, mixed with, you know, classical and the kind of more, I guess, anime sounding aesthetic of a lot of JRPG soundtracks. Really, really good stuff. Again, a soundtrack I come back to all the time. I am definitely going to be buying both of these soundtracks. Actually, I pre-ordered the Chained Echoes one, and I'm going to be buying the Sea of Stars one as soon as I can, because they're both very, very good. Give a slight edge to Chained Echoes, though. Okay, what do we want to talk about next? Graphics. Well, this one's pretty cut and dry, right? Sea of Stars, we knew Sea of Stars was going to be a beautiful game. We knew that from the trailers. I mean, look at it. We're looking at it right now. We've been seeing these trailers since like 2020. We knew the game was going to look great, and it really never let me down. It, like, throughout the entire playthrough, each area, each section of the game, it just looked great the whole time. There's even some animated cutscenes that are, you know, kind of anime style, and those are great. A lot of good stuff going on with the visuals. We knew that going in, kind of like a no-brainer there. Chained Echoes, in fact, let's actually shift gears here. Let's do a quick little, one of those. Someday I'll get a one of those cool like Stream Deck things where I could just hit a button and do that really fast and not have to be all clicky clack on my keyboard. But Chained Echoes, as we can see, I think this game looks really great. And it's one of those games where the more you play it, the more the art style, the more the scenery, I think really comes together and really looks amazing to me personally. There's a lot of similar things, I think. Like some of these moments you could look at and almost feel like they could be in either game. This is all made by, of course, one person. There's one designer for Chained Echoes. I know that doesn't make it a better or worse game in any way. It's just worth mentioning that Matthias Linde, the creator of Chained Echoes, made all of these pixel by pixel, I guess. I mean, maybe he had some help building the assets or you know, I don't know. I don't know anything about game design, so I'm speculating. But I mean, you know, for me, Chained Echoes was not nearly as polished, but I think it was very enjoyable. I think that we have to give the winner to Sea of Stars because it just has the extra polish. And then, of course, in Sea of Stars, you might know that it's actually a 3D game that you're just seeing from a 2D angle because there's all of these lighting. There's the lighting system where the sun and the moon go around and the shadows are cast, and that is so cool. So yeah, easy victory for Sea of Stars right there. Now let's really quickly just talk about some of the customization options in the game. Both games, so Chained Echoes has a unique leveling system, and I really appreciate that about Chained Echoes because it's not like just character goes from level 1 to level 2. It's a lot more kind of menu driven. You choose what to upgrade about your characters. Your characters, their skills and spells that they do in battle can be upgraded. And then you can also do things like upgrade their equipment. You can use this gem fusing system, which I kind of underutilized, and I think that a lot of people underutilize because it's not a very great system. But the cool thing about it is you can kind of ignore it. I think if you want, I mean, you'll probably end up messing around with it and getting some decent gems, but I certainly didn't so much. I mean, I got a few here and there, but not that much. So anyway, that's an interesting mechanic. I think that the leveling system is very interesting in Chained Echoes. Sea of Stars, a lot more traditional, level 1 to level 2. Then you get to choose a particular stat to give some extra upgrade to whenever your character levels up. And all your characters level up at the same time, by the way, in Sea of Stars, which is, I guess, kind of nice, kind of just to keep it consistent. That way, if one character is not battling, they still get the benefit of the upgrade. That's kind of nice. What other customization options? So in Chained Echoes, you have basic, like, you know, difficulty settings. You can change aspects of the game to make it more difficult or easier, more palatable for you. I left everything vanilla. That's how I normally do with games. Sea of Stars, however, did something that I haven't seen before that I thought was really cool and thought it was worth mentioning. I don't think this really factors into my overall scoring of the games or my overall, you know, likability of one game over the other. But Sea of Stars does something where the difficulty settings, the individual difficulty settings that you can tweak in the game are items that you find in the game. They become your equipment. So you actually go into your menu, you go into your relics, and then you can change all of these items or change all of the relics to change the gameplay. I thought that was so cool because it gives a different dimension to the idea of accessibility or, you know, changing difficulty. It feels like an in-game thing that you've earned, even though it's maybe really kind of not, but it feels that way. And so I think players would be a lot more likely to just go to a lower difficulty if they wanted to, because the game just makes it feel like it's sort of part of the game, a choice that you get from an in-game item. kind of interesting, I thought. So, these two games, man, I like them both a lot. And really, aside from all of the things that we just mentioned, I don't really think that you can say, really point to the quality of a game based on those things. I like to kind of just have more of an overview approach to this kind of thing. Chained Echoes, I think, is a better game. I think Chained Echoes gets the job done here. A lot of people, when I made my first video, were frustrated that I would dare compare two games. Like, these two games are going to be great. Why wouldn't we just enjoy them both? And it's like, I guess that's a fair question, but the reason that you might not enjoy them both is because maybe you don't have time. So a video like this can hopefully serve as a guide and let you choose one over the other if you really have to. Now, I recommend both games. I adore both of these games. I didn't pick Sea of Stars as my favorite over the two, but let me tell you, Sea of Stars is not messing around. It is a great, overall experience, even though it's kind of traditional in a lot of its approaches. It's not going to blow you away in any one aspect other than maybe the visuals. But it's just such a solid overall product that I have to recommend it. So I recommend both games. But if you can only play one, and let's face it, this year in video games is absolutely crazy. You got Baldur's Gate 3 just in the RPG side of things. Baldur's Gate 3, Final Fantasy 16, Octopath 2. Square Enix is going crazy with re-releases and ports. Later this month, we're getting the best Star Ocean game, and it's getting a very beautiful remake. So that's probably going to light up the Metacritic side of things. So there's just so much to play. This year is such a quality year for games, but then it's also just a heavy volume year. There's just so much coming out, and you might have to say no to one of these games. You might have to say no to both of these games, and that's just the reality of the hobby. Not everybody can make, some people have time to play one or two games or three games a year, and that's it. They got to just choose very wisely. And that's why I'm making a video like this, or why I would ever make a video like this, is just because, as consumers, we need sometimes a little bit of help on what to spend our time with. So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, I think that Chained Echoes is a masterpiece. And I think that when you just look at the story and the overall gameplay combat system, it is really next level storytelling. It is next level RPG combat that makes things really interesting. And I have to recommend it. If you can, honestly, for me, if you can only play one RPG this year for a 2023 release, I would play this one. I said 2023 release. Chained Echoes is actually a game that came out in December of 2022. But let's be clear. I think that this game should be fair game for end of year lists, for the Game Awards and all of that kind of stuff as a 2023 release. Because let's face it, when those games come out in December, they can't be considered for that year's Game Awards, for example. They have to be the following year. And I think it's really unfair to just, forget about a game or disqualify a game because, should have released your game earlier or whatever. I think that's just such bad logic. I think that this game must be fair game for the Game Awards. And by the way, I don't really care about the Game Awards for one, but unless we're talking Chained Echoes, I really think that Chained Echoes deserves to be on that list. And by the way, like I said, this year is crowded, man. Baldur's Gate 3 probably going to win it. Let's face it. The Metacritic scores, the conversation around that game. Then we got Starfield, huge non-Japanese RPG game year, just with those two alone. So then we got Final Fantasy 16. We got Octopath Traveler 2. I mean, you know, that's a really solid experience. I played it. Don't like the story very much. Has some problems, but overall, Octopath Traveler 2, not messing around. Really good game. And then, you know, we just got a billion other things coming out. Like, I feel like this Star Ocean thing is probably gonna, you know, make a splash. There was a Trails game this year, and then there's Sea of Stars. And if Sea of Stars gets the nomination over Chained Echoes, I'm not going to be heartbroken, but I really feel like Chained Echoes just does more, it innovates more, and it offers an overall better experience. And I think it's just not that it factors into the quality of the game, but I think it's a really cool underdog story that it was made by one person. And for all these reasons, I am so hopeful. I'm so hopeful that Chained Echoes gets the RPG nomination that it deserves at the Game Awards. I hope that it maybe gets nominated for Best Indie Game. And I hope that it gets nominated for a bunch of other stuff as well at other awards. And I hope it tops a bunch of end of year lists. And I hope the conversation around Chained Echoes comes back at the end of the year, because, I mean, like I said, it's a 2023 release. It impacted in 2023, and it did not have time to impact in 2022. So let's get real. 2023 consideration should be the name of the game here. And anyway, guys, I've been rambling for a while. I love both of these games. I promise I will never talk about them side by side in a video like this ever again. I may mention them both in like an end of year video, but I'm not like this, not like side by side versus one versus the other. But thanks for checking me out, and I'm glad that I was finally able to give you guys my answer on this topic that I will never talk about again. All right, have a good one.